Hello again, my name is Casey from Retroactive Arcade. I've talked a few times about Jamma connections, arcade encoders, that type of thing, but I've never really talked about power and their connections from any of these things. So today what I'm going to do is go over a little bit of multi-cade Jamma, multi-board, multi-game boards, and the way to connect your power and your basic wiring for that from the Jamma harness itself. I'm going to try to cover everything off the two different types of Jamma, and there are different types of power supplies here. This is not going to encompass, say, like an old school Miss Pac-Man or Space Invaders or anything like that, their Jamma connection. Now, in theory, it's all the same, but there are a few things that are a little different, like the CGA video and that kind of a thing. It has a lot of stuff in there for coin counters and different setups for their power, because some of them use like 17 volt and stuff like that. I could go on forever, but since it has nothing to do with this video, we're going to move on and I'm going to show you the different types of power for basic Jamma. Alright, so basic power knowledge for these wirings and these setups and whatever is your Jamma board, your multi-board, any Jamma board for that matter, the PCBs, the old school ones as well as these, and well as the multi-boards that I'm going to show in a bit. They all take 5 volt, 12 volt and ground. Sometimes on these harnesses you'll also see a thing for -5 ground or -5 volt on here as well. We never do that, so I'm going to start off by saying that with these Jamma harnesses, you don't see it on this one, but many you will, some pictures on Google, that kind of a thing, or if you do order it and it comes, just because these things aren't regulated to a certain extent, we try to ask for all of the ones that we get without the green. So it's a -5 that would be attached to where I have my finger right now. It's a green thick wire just like these ones. I always just cut them right off before I even start doing anything with them. You don't want to connect that green wire to anything. You don't need it, and you could possibly fry your board or whatever, and then once that's done, then anybody you got it from isn't going to warranty it, or you're going to have to buy a new one if you got direct from somebody or whatever. Yeah, so other than that, what we're going to do in this video is we're going to get basically this half of the harness. This part here is video, but that's all we're going to talk about today is the power setup of things. The button layout and stuff is pretty simplistic, and all the diagrams and stuff are downloadable off of our website. So this is a Suzo Hap arcade power supply. They basically all kind of come the same. There's a switch on the bottom here. You can read this where it says 115 or 230 volt. The ones from China will be the same. They all should be switching power supply, especially if you get it overseas. It should be, and if it's not, then you probably ordered the wrong one. So just if you're looking for one of these, look for the switchable power supply, or make sure that it's 115 volt for North America. If you're from anywhere else or whatever, obviously you're going to want the 230 volt, especially in Europe. And then, yeah, there you go. So you can switch it out here. This one actually has a plug, so you have to like pull the pin off the plug and then move it over. It hasn't been done yet, so it doesn't matter. We're not plugging it in right now. But there's ones from China and stuff that just have a switch. You can actually just put something in there if you can't fit your finger in there, and then just switch it over, and then you're good to go. If you don't switch it over and you hook all this up, basically your light might just come on for a little bit, and then it'll just disappear and the thing won't power on. If you're wondering why it doesn't work, is my power supply garbage? Did I get ripped off? That kind of thing. Check the switch on the bottom first. That's usually 99.99% of the time that's the problem. It hasn't been switched over to 115 volt. They're all clearly marked in the front. Power supplies are pretty straightforward. So we're going to move on, and I'm going to show you how it's all supposed to look when it's connected, and we'll go in series, and I'll show you the quick little steps. Okay, so I've set up the power, just a basic thing. That's most people say, oh, I know what that's all about. I've done that a lot of times, but I'm just going to go through the motions just for everybody, just in case you've never done it before and you want to know. So basically, your yellow is 12 volt, black is ground, red is +5. Now I'm not going to power this thing on and do all that stuff to bench test it or anything here. These are just for display purposes only. But that covers our first 3 connections. If there is that green wire, cut it off or just omit it, tie it off, that kind of thing. So that covers the most part, the most important part of our Jamma harness. Now what that does is that I've said in my videos before, so I'll definitely point it out again here, is that the Jamma boards are keyed regardless of the Jamma board that you find out there, but these harnesses are universal, so they are not. With that being said, the keyed part, the small part of the PCB connector board, you want that, that's the power side. So that's where these are going to connect. Okay, so I'll just slap it on there. Just nice pressure fit. If it's the first time, it might be a little bit hard to get on. Other than that, it should be good to go. So I'll leave it there so you can kind of see where we're going with this. What that does is that powers up the board itself. Now this one here, if you don't have an arcade power supply and you only have a PSU for computer, what you can do is you can actually take one of the older molex connector pins, and there's one on the side there, so you have the option of just plugging that in instead. What you want to make sure you do not do is use both. So you use basically one or the other. So if you don't have an arcade power supply, if you just even have this molex, you can take the wires that are coming off of the harness and connect them into your molex connector and use it that way. So some of these boards are a little bit more universal, which is great. So it gives you a little bit of options. These power supplies run anywhere from 20 to 50 bucks, so it's not a big deal. Computer PSU is going to run you around 50 to 100, depending on which one you want to go with. You're going to want to go with, for a computer power supply, just mention it now, you're going to want to go with a 400 watt plus. You don't want to go into any more than about 650. Usually run about 450, 430, somewhere in there. That seems to be optimum for the other board that I'm going to show you, but it'll work perfect for this. Get this out of the way, it's just a nice tight fit. So moving on here, basically what we do on the inside of our arcades is we use like a 2 or a 4 outlet gang box, and we wire it up inside. For purposes of this video, I'm not going to show you what's inside the way we wire it, for just basic liability on our end of things. You know, you're going to have to look into it from a different, like maybe Google it or find out, or find an electrician friend, that type of thing, to tell you what needs to go in and how to wire it that way. Just because every nation basically does their wiring a little bit differently to code. I'm not going to, you know, show you the way we do it to ours, and then it doesn't work for you and it causes a problem. So basically, you're going to be plugging your wires on the bottom here where you have your AC 115. So we wire it up white, black, and ground. So that's what the circle on there, FG, is ground. So just make sure that you connect it there. So whether it's a 230 volt or 115, it connects the same on here. Yeah, it should be pretty standard stuff. I'm not going to connect it at this time because I'm going to show you use these ends for a demo in a different setup here. Okay, so I'm going to move on to speaker setup on this one, just because it is pretty important for the most part. A lot of people don't know how to set these up, and some of the instructions on them are not very clear. I've done a numerous amount of these, and yeah, you figure out pretty quick which way works and which way doesn't. But basically, you've got your positive and negative for speakers for the white wires closest to the power. You might ask why I'm having ground here with me, but basically you would hook up your positive and your negative to one speaker. Now if you're going to be running 2 speakers off of it, which most people want to do, first you're only going to get mono and stereo sound out of this thing. You're not going to get 3.1 or anything like that. If you want to use that part of things and you want to get a louder sound out of it, 3.1 surround sound or 7.1, whatever, there's a 3.5 millimeter jack on here that you can go out into your speaker setup, and then if it has a separate power supply or amp, you can buy amps and you can power them in your cabinet as well. That'll give you better sound and that type of thing. It's not going to give you that big boom rumbling sound that you might want for theater or whatever out of these carts. That's not what they're made for. They are made to stay as true to the original games as possible. So yeah, you're only going to get, you know, like 16, 32-bit sound, that kind of thing. It's not going to be great. So if you want to have 2 speakers, the reason why I have the the ground on here is you take the positive and you take the negative speaker wires and you connect both of the white ones to the positive sides of both speakers, and then you take your ground and you put it to your negative and you daisy chain it over to the other speaker and connect that to the negative as well. So negative is daisy chained straight to the negative or to the ground on the harness. So it's going to be one of these black wires here, and go direct, or you can go direct to the arcade power supply. If you want to go to the ground part of that, that's fine as well. It'll reduce static if you go directly to the power supply. You might get some static, especially when turning the volume up or down. It'll give you the static in between. When you do that, that means you either have a bad connection and or your ground is dirty on the harness itself. You have to remember that most of these harnesses are mass produced in China and stuff. There's not too many that you can get Canadian, American, or North American made, except for the Suzo Hap ones. Those ones are really high quality. I usually never have problems with them, but they're also 50-60 bucks a piece. So it just depends on your budget and what you want to do. You are still going to get a really decent quality out of this, but sometimes there's issues. So you might have to replace the ends on a couple of them here and there, unfortunately. But I would recommend not going too much more than one of these type of 8 ohm 4-inch speakers, just as basic. If you're going to connect anything like this, if you try to go into something else and convert it, you're just going to run into a whole set of badness. So I would go through your 3.5 millimeter if you're going to connect to a stereo or a set of computer speakers or something. And most Jamma boards have that 3.5 input or jack on there for you. Alright, so this fistful of wires I'm just going to go over really briefly. Basically this connector here is your CGA or VGA, whatever you want, connector here. So basically what happens is that if you have a CGA monitor in an old school cabinet, or you want to reuse an old school cabinet with an old monitor, basically you're going to have to cut this connector off if it won't plug into the chassis. But these are your colors, your red, blue, green, obviously, because they're red, blue, green. One's ground, and then the other one's going to tie in both V and H sync together off of a Jamma board for an old school type of thing. If you want to go new school, I strongly suggest doing the VGA connection on the inside here. That's just your best bet. It'll feed video to both regardless, so you could even run both if you wanted to. I don't know why you'd want to, but basically that's all that's for. There's not much else to say with that, except for the fact that you're going to have to play around quite a bit if you go with this direction. There's not a lot online about it. I've checked, and the only way I've been able to find out how to make it work properly is by playing around with each individual monitor that you get, seeing as though they're so different from each other. There's no universal fit for this. You actually just have to kind of play with it and and try to get it all to work, especially if you're using a VGA to CGA converter or something like that. Then that's all bad news too. So with this, these wires here, these are going to be for your coin counters, your menu setup. It's going to give you 12 volt with ground, so if you want to connect to something else, like LED buttons, that kind of thing, then you're going to want to use your 12 volt. It also has a 5 volt on here as well. It's just a backup set of lines for your for you to play with, and all this stuff is labeled on our sheet that's downloaded for our instruction manual for the Jamma harness. The rest of the buttons from here are all for coin, for your 1-player, for your 2-player, all your buttons up to 6, and it's for your joystick, up, down, right, left, whatever, for your 4-way on that. I'm not going to get into any of that stuff because that'll take a long time for no reason. And we're going to move on to a different type of setup for the Jamma, quadruple X-in-1, so we can move on from there. So this is the quadruple X-in-1, the big Jamma board. This has this specific one can run up to 3,149 games, which is a hard drive that we sell, or which the board we sell with this as well. Basically, I'm just going to go over the way these things set up, because these things are a little more complicated. There's a little bit of redundancy to it, but you can find a way to weed that out if you'd like. just to kind of save some money or whatever you want to do. Just keep in mind that the more connections you make, the more you cut up existing harnesses, things like that, that's where you're going to run into problems for connection issues, as well as, you know, possible fire hazards, that type of thing. For the most part, we're just dealing with 12 and 5 volts and stuff like that, so it's nothing major. That's why I stay away from your full 115 and stuff like that to show you guys on video. True electrician professional should be showing you that, or you can watch as many videos about that as you'd like. You can see here that I still have the arcade power supply hooked up. That's going to power up with the power connected. It's going to power up your top Jamma board, and that's it. So that'll make this little light come on, and it makes this top board active. What this top board does is tell the computer, this is like a huge iPac 2. It seems a little old school, but this thing is kind of bulletproof. You'll get mixed reviews. I've sold, I don't know, I've used at least a couple hundred of these, and I've had like maybe 5 or 6 give me grief. Other than that, I find that the longevity on them is great. We don't just buy them like this, we buy them in pieces and we actually put them together. We add a little bit of RAM to them. We add larger hard drives to them. We inspect them, put them together, and test them all here on our own before we even go out. So maybe that might be the reason why that they last a little more, a little better than some people have said online. But basically, what you want to do is it has to have 2 inlets of power. So this is the first one that we showed you before, so that connects it to the Jamma and powers on Jamma. So that covers the Jamma 100%. But here you'll see you've got like the old school molex connectors that go to power on your CPU. Now you need a computer power supply no matter what way you look at this to make that work. Okay, so as I said before, you're going to want something like a 400 to 650 watt power supply to run this thing properly. The other ones you could get away with 250 to 300 on the smaller Jamma boards. It's not going to be a big deal, but you get a cleaner power out of something that's 400 or above. But if you get higher than that, it's just too much for no reason. Now you're going to notice 2 on this one. You never connect the 4-prong on the 2000 or 3000 in 1 Jamma boards. There's only one that you do where it needs to have it, and it's a quad core. It actually has a circular cutout on the top Jamma board, and it is for the 2001 game board, and I think that's the only list that it comes with. Don't quote me 100%, as things change constantly, and if you're watching this movie a month from now or 6 months from now, that could change. So just make sure that if it's a dual or a quad core CPU underneath running the board, you need to connect your 4-prong 12 volt and ground to this. Now what that means is that you've got this one's beautifully color coded, so that's awesome, but that's this 4-prong is going to go there. So basically what you want to do is take that off and connect your molex connector here. It only fits on one way, it's keyed, so that's always nice. And then you're good to go. Nice snug fit. That's going to power your board down below for your CPU, and this is going to power your top board. Now you might say, oh, well, that's redundant and whatever, but for these purposes, that's kind of what it is. But basically, if you want, you can cut an end off your power supply, and you can run your 12 volts and stuff and connect these lines off your harness to the lines off your power supply to feed it, so you only have 1 power supply to run. Now, I would strongly suggest that you, if you're going to run a bunch of power off of your computer power supply, you're better off dropping the 20 or 40 bucks, 50 bucks for an arcade power supply for all your alternate powers. So if you're going to be running your LED lighting, you're going to be running your say you have like a little Pi amp or something for the sound and all that kind of good stuff, I would strongly suggest that you use a clean power source or a separate alternate clean power source for those items, and then just use your computer power supply to run the board. You're going to get the cleanest power out of it that way, and you're not going to get any crackling and static sound and that kind of thing. If you start drawing too much power from the power supply, then you might have to upgrade it into the 650, the 700, that type of thing to get more power out of it. but then you're looking at, you know, almost doubling your price of a power supply for no reason when you can just get a nice cheap arcade power supply. At this point, I'm going to let you know that with one of these power supplies, you can regulate the draw of the power that's coming out of it. So if you are taking a lot of power out of your arcade power supply, you can actually turn the power up or down. So you can generate how much power you want to come out of there. The only way to tell how much power that's coming out of there is to use a voltmeter. So when this is under load or turned on and powered on, you can touch all your ends there and you can find out your voltage that's coming out, and you can turn this to regulate your voltage up or down. You're not going to want to go too much higher than what's on here. If you are drawing a ton of power, then you want to go, you know, like 0.5 over where you're going to be at, so that you know that you're covered for your power draw on there. But if you're not drawing a lot of power on there, you want to be as close to the marked number as possible, so +5, +12, that kind of thing. Other than that, I think we've got the power part covered of all this stuff. If you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to post stuff on this video, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. We're usually good within 24 hours latest, but we usually get on there as soon as we can. So I'm going to show one more little power setup here. And I'm just going to throw it in as a tidbit because we have a bunch of people asking us about our EMI filters. This is enclosed all-in-one power switch. You can put this anywhere on your machine. Obviously you're going to want to put it on the back if you have to plug in a computer power cable. You don't want to see that hanging out the front. But basically it's the easiest way to set things up. It's the cleanest way and it's the safest way. What we do is we take our power and we put our little CSA approved ends on there, and we connect them all to the EMI filter, and Bob's your uncle, you're ready to rock. You just plug in your computer power supply, and then we can switch on and off our receptacle that we put inside of our machine. It's pretty straightforward. You won't really have to go too much further than this on power for your machines until you get into like an LED setup. Then you're going to want something like this. This is an LED harness. It's pre-made. It's ready to rock. It's got the larger ends on here for you to connect to the lamp holders and stuff on your buttons. But you connect these directly to your. This one's red, but usually you want to run it to your 12 volt and your ground. Make sure that whatever LEDs you get, you read what voltage they are. You want to pay attention to that big time, because if you don't burn them out right out of the gate and they work good, they're either going to be too dim or too bright, and either way they'll burn out really fast, and you won't get the longevity out of them that you're supposed to. So read on the lamp itself, pull it out of the lamp holder if it's not out when you get it, and it'll say on there +12 or +5. Go with the recommended voltage on them, and you should be good to go.